How's it going, everyone? Vince here with On to the Next podcast. This week, I have on one of my best friends, but he's not only one of my best friends, he's actually becoming one of the major influencers in fitness. I can't wait for you guys to listen to this one and listen to Joe's journey. This is On to the Next.
It's been a long time coming. They ain't cuffing my cloth, they tugging it. Putting up numbers, 99 pounds, and I still kept it 100. Yeah, it's been a long time coming. They ain't cuffing my cloth, they tugging it.
What's up, Joe? How's
What's
it
up,
going,
man?
man?
Doing good, brother.
Hey, man, I really, I can't believe it's just us two right now because usually it's the four of us. If you haven't checked it out, I do another podcast called The Kings of Monaco, and
Yeah.
this guy next to me is one of the Kings of Monaco. So
Oh yeah.
he thinks he's the king, but
No.
we'll see. But I'll let you have the judgment by the end of this podcast.
Oh, we have the better haircuts of the four.
Absolutely, yeah, I have mine
Come on.
covered up all the
Come on.
time. My dome is a little sensitive. That's why I always
Looks
have a
good.
hat.
Looks good, man. Looks good.
But how you doing tonight, man? So glad you came on and joined me tonight.
Doing good, man. I appreciate it. Like I know we do our Kings of Monaco, but I know this is going to be a very different conversation. And I love what you're doing with your podcast, and excited to share my story and anything I could do to help encourage somebody else and really share what the things that God's allowed me to move on to, if I could say it that way.
Yeah.
Different pivotal times in my life. So it's a great way to I love what you're doing. Let me just say that. I love what you're doing. I think a lot of people could look back and see or they can pinpoint pivotal times in their lives. And I love that you're pulling that out of people's story and then, airing out how it shaped them.
Yeah, and along the podcast, it's funny because most of the people who are probably going to be on this podcast are people who are going to influence me in some way or inspired me or just been a big part of my life. So and sometimes I'm not going to know them. Sometimes it's going to be somebody that um down the road that everybody else might know, but I kind of just had this conversation with them for the first time. And it's like, man, I just want to get to those people like, this is why you inspired me, and this is what I love about what you're doing, because there's so many of those people who in my life have been out there to just kind of be that like push for me to just take that next step in my life. And man, I tell you, man, you were such a big part of that for me. Even as a young age, we kind of were side by side doing things, kind of this similar way of growing up,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, man, we're gonna get into that because to where you are now, I'm so happy for where you're at now and the things you're doing,
Thank you.
the way you've transformed yourself to who you are now. And I think the one consistent thing with you has always been God in your life, and
Absolutely.
you've always used that to kind of find your direction, and totally appreciate that about you, man. So
Thank you.
and I just want to talk because if you don't know, this is Joe.
Joe.
This is
Yeah.
JA Cycles. A lot of you guys may know him as from his work on the bike, and it's a great thing that you're doing. But I've known you since I think the first grade. So, and back in Monaco Elementary School in a town we call Carmer City.
Yeah. Well, and that's
And
why we call the pod Monaco or Kings of Monaco, because we all
yep,
went to Monaco Elementary, and it was kind of
and
fun of a fun
yeah,
play off of that word or that title of or that the name of our elementary school, rather.
yeah, we were the kings of that domain, right? In our own minds.
Yeah, in our own minds. I
So
mean,
yeah, but it's cool. But yeah, so we met at a young age, and I kind of wanted to get even before we met because I don't know um, what the point was when. So your dad was a pastor. Um, he passed on. It's how long has it been since he's passed on?
it's been um almost 13 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's been
In
that
April.
long.
Yeah.
So, but just
2012.
a great man of God, a great mentor of mine, and I know he meant so much to you. But so he was a pastor, but he wasn't that way all your life. When you were really young,
Yeah.
when did he take that step and kind of where you're like, what is going on right now? Because I mean, I don't know if you still old enough, were you old enough to kind of realize something's different about dad?
Oh, totally, man. I mean, talk about like pivotal moments in my life. My dad, I remember growing up being afraid of my dad because he drank a lot and he was very verbally abusive and he had like that Mexican machismo. You know, he would come
Mhm.
home a little bit tipsy and hooting and hollering and what did we do all day and what's going on. And so I could remember several times like literally going to my room and locking the door and just going in there as maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, something around there, just waiting for him to like calm down or stop talking so loud. Because even him talking loud, which Evie says I talk loud sometimes. I use my diaphragm. You talk with authority. Would put a little fear in my heart as a kid. So I remember being a little afraid of him all the time. Uh, but the pivotal moment was my dad had gotten hurt. He was a foreman and in a construction company, so he'd oversee projects. And he fell. If I remember the story right, he fell in a hole, hurt his back, and basically had to go on disability. After that. But there was a time between when disability kicked in and when and trying to make enough money for his family. And I remember him. He would always be out in the front watering his lawn. Typical Mexican, no shirt, beer, just drinking, watering, doing his thing. And there was a neighbor that would always walk around the neighborhood just to take walks. That was his thing. He would just walk for exercise. And he would invite him to church every day, or at least every time he's seen him.
Mm.
And during that really tough moment of my dad's life, not knowing how he was going to provide. And I don't know, you probably remember that my parents would make burritos and my dad would go sell them. Sometimes we'd grab the eggs out
Those
of
things
them.
are those things were good.
Yeah. So my mom would make burritos, tamales, and do whatever they had to do to make ends meet. My dad would go around to different places, different job sites, gas stations, and sell burritos to make a living. And so this was during that time. He was feeling real desperate, like what was going to happen. Finally accepted the invitation to go to church in Commerce City. Lily of the Valley, Templo Lirio de los Valles, it was a Spanish church. We went there, and during worship, my mom and dad just broke. Like they weren't even standing. I remember like looking at him like what's going on, and they
So
were just
you
there.
vividly remember this.
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were holding each other's hands and just broke. Just the tears didn't stop. It didn't even stand. I mean, it was during worship. It was like before they even knew what the gospel was, as far as like, I mean, we always went to a Catholic church, so they knew who Jesus was and all that.
Yeah.
But this was the first time I seen him break. And so he accepted Christ and we went home and he was just a different person. I remember within a week or so, maybe even uh, less than that. I don't remember the timeline that part, but we used to be the house where there was always the parties, and my dad was kind of the head of his friends. So he was always a leader to some degree. Led
Mhm.
in the construction site, led his friends. Like we're the party house, which later he led a church. Like he was just this leader guy, and he had my sister and I, Anna, grab all the alcohol off from the bar and just dump it down the toilet. So I vividly remember my sister and I, getting all the bottles of alcohol and just dumping him down the toilet, and he was never the same. He was church going, faithful, did everything he could for the church, until the day God called him to pastor a church. And so that was when I knew like God was real. God did something different, in his life. And there was just no way I could deny God after that, after seeing, not being afraid of him anymore.
Yeah, and so I told this story to Lac Cree, we call her Cree, Lucretia. She was on the first podcast, but I remember like I used to carry my lunchbox, have my cross and my little Bible in there, and you were like right by my side doing the same thing. And it was
We were
like
bold.
because yeah. So we were, I mean, we were telling kids they were going to hell and stuff.
Dude, we were, yes. Dude, that's so funny you say that, because we were like super bold, right? Wearing the crosses, outspoken. I remember that was right around the time when the Rapture movies came out. Do you remember those movies that
Yeah.
would scare the
Yep.
crap out of everybody?
Dude,
And dude, I would go to elementary school telling everybody about the beast that was gonna like sting them and
dude,
kill them if they got left
they're
behind. And
done. Just cursing. They're like, "Oh, you're definitely going to hell. This guy right here."
yeah, it was very a legalistic time of the church for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and because I think I say it all the time. Like when somebody first, is introduced to God, I feel like that's when the fire is just like it's just roaring like a bonfire that just got a gallon of gasoline on it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That
And
was us. That was us.
so and sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad, depending on. But I think the direction your parents took you in was, I mean, it was amazing. I was so glad that I had kind of a partner in crime, so to speak,
Yeah.
in that, because my parents were my mom, she was her and my um uncle and auntie, they had their own church, and they were really, I mean, they had that fire and they wanted to save the world through Jesus Christ, and
Yeah.
their kids were going to do it too. So that's why they sent me with the cross and the Bible, and
Yeah.
they're like, get it, go save some lives today.
Well, I remember, even right around Halloween times, like we would both go to our church for whatever they had at the church, but we would be dressed up as a shepherd or, or like a goat or something. Like, I don't know about a goat, but like we both have our little Bible costumes, that they would send us to church with.
Yeah,
And,
and instead of giving out candy, we were giving out pamphlets, right? Those little, what are they
yeah,
called?
those tracks, bro, the
Tracks.
tracks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, now you're taking it back. Now you're taking it back.
So yeah, we had,
That longer one that like opened up like widescreen.
yeah,
That was
and
like
dude,
that was
some of
the
those things
early
was
HD.
some of those things would scare you, wouldn't they?
Dude, they were like pretty legit
You
and
give those to
straight. Like,
kids, and I
yeah,
mean, man, get convicted carrying those things around.
yeah,
But yeah, man, it was such a good time. And I mean, as we grew up, there was I with any kid, I think there's challenging times. There's those, what what line do I walk, because my friends all want to be out doing this. My parents are saying doing this. I don't want to exactly do what my parents are saying, and we all give you a hard
yeah,
time because you're like, oh, pastor's kid. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, your dad enters into being a pastor, and you're
yeah,
like, man, this is, I mean, it had to be hard for you at times, because it was like, Dad, okay, I get it, Dad. My friends just want to do this. I want to be able to do this sometimes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I what do you think was the biggest challenge for you as being a PK?
Well, I think that like if we're honest, and we said we were gonna be, right?
Yeah,
Like we
totally.
we had our little potty mouths and everything, and we'd go find the girls and do all that stuff. I mean, the one thing that we never did, which was really cool and interesting about our group of friends, and speaking specifically of the Kings, like Vince LeBeau and you and I and Carlos, rather, sorry, and that we might have had our seasons of being a potty mouth and our seasons of trying to find all the chicks or whatever, but we never like really did drugs. We never really like got drunk, you know, we never really like, you know, we just never did that for whatever, none of us. It was one of
Yeah.
those things that we just all stayed away from, you know, and we never even had that conversation. We never even said, "Hey, are you, you know, do I, should I did, you know, it was just kind of like a thing we
Yeah,
just
and
didn't do."
so yeah, the drugs like I've never touched any drugs, and I know there's a lot of people who kind of deal with that as
Mhm.
a serious issue. You know, that's something that it's in just part of their lives, part of their daily lives that they've seen some from they're little to onwards. You know, and you know, in high school I did start drinking and stuff, and I did do some of that, and I felt like it was kind of a point in my life when I was like, I just need to fit in. You know, we all had those times.
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I think we have those times as adults sometimes where we just kind of
Yeah, of
want to be a part of some kind of social group, you know.
course, of
And
course. But
but
I don't
I
think it was ever excessive though, you know what I mean? Like
no,
it's not like you
n-
were this high school alcoholic or something, you know what I
no,
mean?
it was
Yeah.
like more for a social thing, you know, and
Sure.
that's kind of was based around. And
Yeah.
but I feel like what we were given as young people was a gift, and that was a gift of God in our lives, the convictions that we had, because we knew there was always that to look to, or what we needed to come back to, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
um you know, we uh I I think a big part of what we've had even through our younger years was the part of y- another big part, because I know that you were always like musically inclined, and that was another big part that I was like, oh man, somebody else. Because dude, I remember when we were in elementary school and middle school, like we were always kind of the ones who were keeping the beat with everything,
Yeah.
and we were
Yeah.
always like the ones who were able to do things. Like the teacher was like, hey, we need you to do this, and me and you were like boom 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 boom,
You got
and
it.
it was
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, these two are.
Mhm.
And that was cool that, and we kind of carried that to our high school years when we got into GNC. I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you one thing real quick, and this is kind of off
No,
topic.
and I do wanna, like, further answer your question about pastor's kid because there's a lot there, but go for it. What ask me.
Yeah. You, and this is totally off subject because this is kind of what we do on the Kings of Monaco podcast.
Yeah.
'Cause- but it was one of those curious questions I thought about today because I was like, what are we going to talk about in elementary school and everything? So in elementary school, because we were talking about gym teachers for some reason. Funny story. One of my son's friends is a gym teacher, and so we
Yeah.
were kind of talking about our Coach Roundtree, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
dude, do you remember those courses that you remember
The
those courses?
Piranha
What were they?
Path.
Oh my goodness,
The
Piranha
Piranha
Path.
Path.
That's what it's called.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dude, the Piranha Path was legit, bro.
Dude, those were the best, weren't they?
And a little dangerous if
Dude,
we're being honest.
little
Remember he
a
would
lot,
take the
yeah.
chin-up bars and put them on the ground, and you'd be walking on a bar, like literally a bar, like
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just to give a little more context for whoever's listening or watching, the Piranha Path was this obstacle course that Mr. Roundtree would create, our gym teacher, once a year. And so you'd walk into the gym and there were ropes and bars and you would have to walk across a plank and do all the climb a rope, climb, you know, and there were all these paper piranhas on the ground. And so essentially you had to get through this piranha path, this obstacle course without falling off any of the obstacles because you would get eaten by piranhas, the
Yeah.
paper ones. Yeah.
It
So
was something I thought about because I was like, man, me and I felt like there was a few people because I felt like I was athletic, you know, in my own mind sometimes. But you were one of those kids who were athletic too. So I was always like, I need to compete with Joe, you know. So
dude, but you always got me. You and Steve Valdez always had us on the pull-ups, if you remember.
yeah,
Like
dude, I
I
was
couldn't
like
do a
a
pull-up for
master of those.
anything.
Dude, I can't do
That
a
was
pull up now. It's just like
yeah. That was the one thing that, like, I couldn't do were the
yeah,
pull-ups, so props to you guys on that. You remember
yeah.
Steve Valdez would just be like,
Oh, it's
you
a
know, just
maniac.
like 20 or 30 right in a row, no big
Yeah.
deal.
But yeah, I so just fun times. But let's
Yeah.
get back to what you were talking about.
Dude, that's fun. That's a fun memory. No, but as far as like, being a pastor's kid, I think I would always go back and forth between being proud and being like, never embarrassed, but like, let me just be quiet and not say anything, because on
Mhm.
one hand, you're proud that your dad pastors a church, you're part of a church, and on the other hand, if you're proud, like people act different around you, or they expect you to pray for every meal, or they don't want to invite you to certain things, so you have the two sides of it, because I was always a realist. I don't think I was ever, even though there was, our episodes or our seasons of being super legalistic and everything was the devil and everything was,
Mhm.
but I was always like, no, I still want to have fun. I still want to play sports. I still want to, go to the mall, still want to wear Jordans and Guess jeans and all that, and
Yeah.
so it'd be like, just if I could explain it, like just one side I was super proud, the other side was like, do we have to bring that up? Like everybody knows, like we don't have to bring that up, and no, and I'm not going to pray for the meal today, or no, it's just, it was kind of a dual thing,
Yeah.
um I never, but with that said, one of the things that my dad was really good at is he never, because I hear a lot of stories about pastors' kids feeling like, oh, I had to act a certain way because it was a pastor's kids. I always had to do this. I never felt that pressure. I always felt like I could just be who I was and not feel like, uh, I had to be a certain way just because I was a pastor. Because in other words, like when I started playing the drums at that church in Commerce City, which is my introduction rather to music, that was back when you should wear a tie and you should wear something nice on the
Mm.
stage because you were representing God. And I would wear jeans, and I had this toucan shirt, it was super bright yellow. And I was like, all right, I'm just going up in my toucan shirt and then playing the drums, and I would get the looks from the other people, like this kid isn't even dressed for the Lord. And I didn't care.
Disrespectful.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't care. So, and my dad didn't tell me I had to either. So
That's awesome.
that's one thing that, man, I am so grateful for, that I wasn't put in a box to act like a certain way. You know?
Yeah, I never felt like your dad was overbearing. Um,
I mean,
he
there were
would
there were times,
yeah,
with the
yeah.
haircut and the styles and all that,
I
right?
well, that's
But
what I was just gonna say.
yeah, yeah.
Like, there were certain things, but I don't ever feel like he was always kinda like, "Oh, you're a sinner, you need to repent." It
Yeah.
was never anything like that. It was just like, that's wrong, so you need to straighten up a little," you
Yeah.
know? It
Well
wasn't yeah.
well, I mean, if anything, we had the best style out of all our friends. So it wasn't like, you had to dress a certain way or wear a tie or, look goody two shoe. I mean, we were styling, man. We had all the gear, from the
Yeah, and
Jordans to the hats to the bomber jackets to the IOU sweaters. We had what the best,
yeah, and it's and that's another thing is like your parents weren't like so overbearing to where like, oh no, that's all stuff of the world. You need to not consume yourself with that. They're like, oh, we're gonna take care of you, we understand, and we want you to be a normal kid.
Yeah.
But being a normal kid also comes with you need to be obedient and follow there's a certain restriction on be a good kid, be a good steward of God at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think there's times that you felt like, oh, whatever, wanted to do your own thing. But I think you know you from middle school, because I feel like we were bad kids in middle school.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. We were
like,
kind of
we
bad
we
for
had a rough
sure.
stretch through middle school, but you going into high school, I feel like you changed, quite a bit, you're, and I kinda separated myself from you because I didn't at the time, like, even, like, my sophomore year, I didn't wanna be about that, and I knew you did.
Mhm.
I it's like I feel bad now because it's like we were such good friends, but I'm like, "Ah, I don't wanna be a part of that right now." I wanted to kinda be the bad kid,
Sure. Yeah.
and, ended up doing a lot of stuff that I ended up having to move to my dad's house because I was doing so many bad things, but, I thank God for, your friendship and Carlos's friendship when I moved to my dad's and kind of started straightening things out. You know, that's kind of when when you guys were already formed as God's new creation, and you're like, hey, we could really use you, and we really would love to have you. And dude,
Yeah.
that was such a big moment in my life
Mm.
because I loved music so much, and I wanted to use it in so way. I would remember when I went to Lincoln High School. Uh, I didn't really have a lot of friends because I was like I didn't grow up there, you know. I didn't
Yeah.
do it, and so at that time, my like passion was all I had was music at that time. So there would be times where I would go into the theater all by myself. The theater was empty, and I would just go play the piano like for
Mm.
hours.
Wow.
And
Didn't know that.
I really got better at my craft just doing that. That was such a vital part of me getting better at music because I would just spend hours in there. And um you know, I still went on and played sports and everything, but music was always there. And you know, my grandfather, my dad played music, and so, and I know your dad was a great musician and he played, and so it kind of carried down to you with your musicality, you know. And so when I joined you guys, it was like that was a pivotal time in my life because I was in the middle of kind of like, do I want to continue seeking God? Because um my dad, I consider him a godly man. You know, he has faith in God. He's Catholic, they're Catholic, and um there's a little bit of differences of the way they kind of their beliefs, you know.
Sure.
There's differences. But I think seeking God the way I started out as a little kid, the little kid with a Bible and a cross, you know, that kind of was reintroduced when I got back to playing with you guys, you know, as one of the group members of God's new creation. And so that was a big part for me because I think you and Carlos were such a big help in my life at that time.
Mm.
And I couldn't be more appreciative of that time. um i I think what kind of made what made you initially like want to start that up with God's new creation? Was it Carlos's idea? Was it kind of you and Carlos a mutual thing with you
It
guys?
was so we were into music that we couldn't listen to, you know? We
Yeah,
always loved music. So I was at the time I was playing drums in the worship team, still kind of learning that whole thing. But we would still like rap albums and we would still like, music that obviously was very wrong, like was you can't listen to this, you can't listen to that, you know.
yeah,
And we went to one of the Bible stores back when there were Bible stores, and there was a cassette by PID. There was 2
yeah,
cassettes that were rap. We had never seen Christian hip hop before. This was like, what is going on right now? This is the best thing life has to offer. And so one of them was PID, and it had, I think, maybe 5 songs on it. And then that was, and this, you flip the tape over and it was all the tracks of the
yeah.
songs. So you have
Oh,
5
okay.
songs. Yeah, that's how it started. And you had 5 rap songs and then 5 tracks. We're like, well, let's rap to the tracks. Let's learn that. And then Stephen Wiley came out. He was another early
Mhm.
hip hop guy. And that's what started it. PID. It was Preachers in Disguise is what that
Yeah,
album. I don't think that's what the group was called. I don't remember what the album was called, but it was
yeah.
because they left the soundtracks on the back and we're like, let's rap to those. And then we're like, why don't we make our own songs? And sometimes there were poems to girls and sometimes there were poems to God, like that was kind of what we were doing. But we ended up doing a fundraiser. Uh, and I don't know if it was the 3 of us at that time already, or do we have the drum
It
machine already?
No, it was the 3 of us. We went out
Okay.
and, yeah, we
We
did
did
a
a fundraiser,
fundraiser.
right? We were
Yeah,
washing cars or we are doing something.
raking leaves, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was what, 500-600 bucks, something like that.
Yeah.
That drum machine, the Yamaha DRW something or another.
Yeah.
And that's how we started making. Then we made our own beats after that, you know, and then the rest was history. You had had a
Because
keyboard, or you bought one or something like that. I can't remember.
you guys did have something though that you were making beats with, weren't you? Because
Probably,
when
yeah, I feel like it was. I don't know if it was that. I think we moved up to that
yeah,
Yamaha, but I don't
you
remember what
you
we
did
used
have
before
something
that.
because I remember you guys the song that got me, I'm like, dude, I want to be a part of this, is when I heard you guys first do The Pain Came From Inside. And
Okay,
I was like, oh my goodness, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
nice.
Like, when I heard that song at one of the youth rallies that you guys were performing at, or
So we performed
get-togethers.
before you joined. Is
Yes,
okay.
I
I'm
remember
trying
it.
to remember
It
the
was,
timeline now.
dude, it's so, and I vividly remember that you guys, maybe we did raise money and I wasn't part of the group yet. I don't know, because
I feel like that Yamaha was an upgrade for whatever we had,
yeah,
though.
I think it
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
but
I have to ask Carlos if he remembers.
yeah. So we, yeah, dude, I remember that. Like, I mean, that's a moment that's like, it's like you took a picture in your mind and that moment is there. That moment will always be with me, with you guys performing that song. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is. And then when you guys asked me, like, hey, you should join us.
Yeah.
I was like, absolutely.
Yeah, and we
I
had
wanna be,
no vocals at all. Like, before you, it was just rap. It was just hip hop.
yeah,
We didn't sing. We still can't
yeah,
sing. You were the only one. You would just get so frustrated and be so patient with us. You're like, yeah,
yeah.
okay, close enough.
Where
You know,
was the auto tune back then?
I know it was auto. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
No,
Yeah.
but yeah,
We
that
made it work.
yeah, man, it was. I loved it, and that was such a big part of our lives. You know, the touring and everything like that. That was just, it was pretty much the back end of high school till, we hit our early 20s,
Yes.
that we were part of that group. And dude, it was so much fun. I mean, didn't you have, like, wasn't that one of the funnest times? That, I mean,
Oh,
we have great times now to look
yeah,
on, but dude, I think of that time in our lives, just being with your best friends, going out
yeah,
touring, doing
yeah,
music. It was
yeah.
great. And so
Recording
during that,
sessions and all that.
oh yeah,
We
getting out.
we we drive in the middle of the night and go to CU or whatever. Carlos had the little studio. Then we went to FTM or Faith Tape FTM Studios.
FTM, yep.
Yeah, and then yeah, so all kinds of good
Yeah,
times.
just a lot of fun. And I always think about that time because there's another part of the story during that time that we both had significant others, well, girlfriends at the time, like
Mhm,
in high school, that we actually both got married to.
mhm.
And that was a big part because unfortunately, both of us, we got married young, both of us got divorced young,
Mhm.
and I think that's a pivotal part of both of our lives because
Absolutely.
there. And I wanted to bring up because let me bring it up because I there
Yeah.
is a there was an article and I was kind of looking up research.
Mhm.
And I there were some articles, but it's funny because we always ask Chat GPT these questions,
Yeah.
and I just asked Chat GPT, hey, has Christian beliefs caused divorces?
Mhm.
And I'll give you the answer that Chat
So
GPT
let's hear
said.
it. Let's hear it.
It says, yes, Christian beliefs have sometimes contributed to divorces, although they can also promote strong, lasting marriages. The influence of Christian beliefs on divorce depends on how individuals interpret and apply their faith.
Mm.
So I and that's the front end of it, and kind of talks about the legalism, the pressure. Um, there's sometimes um it's mostly based on the pressure of marrying young. And I think even as Christians, and this might be a touchy subject for some, because I think, I don't want to say it's right in saying that Christians are pressured to getting married young, but they're at the same time there kind of is that pressure.
Yeah, of course.
But because you feel like, well, I love this person, and it's the right thing to do because that's what we're told to do. That's what
Sure.
the Bible is scripturally. That's what we're intended to be as a married couple. And I had a discussion. It's crazy because I had this discussion with my pastors about their marriage and how they went, and the the counsel before they got married, you know, into their marriage. Something that I didn't really do, honestly,
Mm.
Joe. I
Right,
didn't
right.
have I didn't have that counsel when
Yeah.
I first got married. And I never like to I and there was a lot of blame game for me out of my first divorce. I of course you're like, oh, it was her fault. She did this, she did that. But not until recent years, like, I looked back and I'm like, "Man, I there's a lot of stuff that I could have done as a
Mhm.
young man to be better in that time," you know?
Sure, sure.
Should I have even taken the step of getting married,
Mhm.
or taken the steps to, like, enter a relationship that I really had no business entering, or,
Right.
and I think a lot of young people, they have a really hard time deciphering whether they should get married or not in that time in their lives. I mean, how was that time for you? Was it a kind of a similar thing for you?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, we were it was kind of expected, if you're gonna date, you get married. And
Yeah,
but there was no kind of counseling, to your point. There was no kind of it's just you do it because God said. There was no kind of preparation. There was no kind of how do I be a husband? How do I have a healthy relationship? Kind of all that stuff. And and just to clarify, like God has made something beautiful out of both of our lives,
yeah,
outside of that.
mhm,
But and so we're strictly speaking about what happened, what could have happened had we known. And obviously, I think we would both agree that God doesn't want anybody to get a divorce because it's painful, it's ugly, it breaks families apart, relationships, you lose them, like kind of all of the above. But God also fixes and He restores and He gives you back things and He gives you He puts you in places that you didn't know you were going to be in. Um, in the middle of this chaos, in the middle of the brokenness, he restores things. And so um I say that because, yeah, I mean, it wasn't God's intention. We were doing our best to do what we were told that we should do, having no preparation. And I resonate with what you said last, in that, you think back, like I could have did this or I should have did that. And I remember um feeling like after it was almost over, just like probably spend too much time at church. I've with my friends too much. Maybe I'm negligent, maybe there's no time spent in this relationship, and that caused, her to go to somebody else, you know what I mean?
mm,
And so that which is ultimately what happened. I mean, people know my story, and so can I take full blame? I mean, there's always two people,
yeah,
everybody has to make their decision. But could I have spent more time? Could I have had I known? But you don't know what you don't know, And so I guess going back to where we started, yeah, if your belief, according to ChatGPT, which I would agree with, depends on where you're at and what you believe in, and if you're on the same page and if you really understand what God, um, at that age, the intention for marriage, I guess, if you will. And I don't think we had a clue.
and
Yeah.
here's another perspective, because when me and my girlfriend at the time, when we entered a relationship, I don't think I was really fully following God,
Mm,
and I know she didn't have a relationship with God either. But when I started in the ministry, it was kind of a given. Well, you're you kind of need to follow God now. And I say that because
mm.
that's important because now she's kind of I don't want to say forced, but maybe
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
say, hey, it's kind
Didn't
of
sign up for
expected.
this.
Yeah, it's kind of expected you to follow God also, even though so if you want to be with me, you got to be with God, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think I went about it the wrong way and saying, how can we work on your walk with God also or together.
Mhm.
I don't think that was any of that. So I think
Right.
that's important for a lot of young people to think about, does their significant other, do they agree with the same path that you're on fully without saying, well, I love you, so I'm just gonna do it, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like it's a compartmentalized belief. In other words, that, yeah, we go to church on Sundays. Yes, if somebody asks, I'm a Christian, but the relationship surrounding that wasn't Christian, if you will, if that makes sense, right? Like there were no
Yeah.
components of application to the relationship, or a lot of regular life, at least from
Yeah.
my experience too. It
No,
was
I
just this is what we do, but at home, like what movie we watch, or what do we do, what do we do? Like it was just like like completely separate,
yeah.
just like a
And
title almost.
but you were and it's a big part of what who you were because I mean you were uh, you know, part of the church, whether it be doing the ministry part with us or doing the ministry part with your parents, kind of starting to take on that role of youth leader and everything else. And so, like I said, it was kind of just expected. She needed to be a part of that also if she was going to be a part of your life. And that was never that I really have thought and prayed about all that stuff, looking back at
Mhm.
it now, because I didn't want it to be like that when I met my wife now, Bree. And I always felt like when I met my wife now, and you could kind of um, let me know also if this is kind of where when you met your wife, because when I met her, it felt more right because there was no expectations on that. She knew who I was. I was still like after I got a divorce because you know we have a similar story. This is it's almost like it's crazy because I feel like more connected with you than a lot because of the similarities we have growing up, the Christian walk, and then going through some hard times, whether it be through middle school, high school, and then having these relationships and having our wife go with somebody else. And it was like, it's really hurtful. But when you take it into your next relationship, how am I going to take that with me without bringing all the hurt with me, you
Yeah.
know? And that was one good thing. I felt like I never took the hurt with me. I felt like
Mm.
I was like, I'm just gonna. This is a relationship that I need to start, and there's no expectations of I I want to take you for who you are. And
Yeah.
my wife had belief in God. She went to church and everything, but I never felt like I never had to force her to do anything. I didn't have to force her to have a relationship with God because she
Mm.
felt like if it was there, it was there. And fortunate for me, it was there, her
Yeah.
belief with God and her relationship, and we always still work on it.
So for me, it was different because I wasn't probably fully healed yet, and so I had trust issues. But at the same time, I knew that I knew she was the one,
Yeah.
and so I spent the first 2 almost 3 years after getting married going to counseling by myself to
Mm.
figure out who I was. I don't know if I ever told you guys that, but I went to counseling for three
No, I
years.
didn't know that.
Yeah, because I still had all of these issues, and I knew if I didn't do something that I would be divorced twice, and I didn't want
Yeah.
that. Like I didn't want that, because I was bringing in some toxicity, if you will, to my new relationship, and I knew it was wrong. I knew it was me. I knew I had the healing to do. I knew it was on me. I owned it like 100%.
Mhm.
So I had to go and get counseling, get some help. Why am I still like this? What's going on? Dig a little deeper. What really is behind all the layers of what just happened? Not just the divorce, but did it start before that? And I found out a lot. A lot of issues that I had started from a very
Yeah.
young age.
Yeah, and
Um,
I mean, it's like when our insecurities just, um, keep pushing at us,
yeah,
with anything. And I kinda wanted to get a little bit into that, and I don't wanna put you out on, like,
yeah,
say who you are, but I so when we were growing up, I mean, everybody always saw you as Big Joe,
mhm,
because you're a big dude, and you kinda carried that, but when you got to a certain point in your life, you're like, I need to start, um, transforming not only, who I am spiritually, and I always put that thing out there because it's stuff that I still need to work on because I it's spiritually, and I pray and I work on my spiritual life. Your mental, doing your, educating yourself,
mhm,
whether it's reading or actually educating yourself, and physically. I think those 3 parts are really important and growing a strong foundation for yourself.
yes,
And I felt like, even after you got a divorce, you're like, it's time to really, and it wasn't I never had a feeling like it was like, "Oh, I need to get um, back on the train of, like, looking good," or anything like that for anybody. I really felt like it was solely for you, that you wanted to get out there and better yourself because, believe it or not, Joe was not always this chiseled dude who you see next to me. That I mean, and I felt like that was sometimes a part of your insecurities, but
mhm,
I think you kind of, you were like, "Man, I don't wanna chase these insecurities. I wanna do something that's just really honestly good for myself." And that was a big pivotal moment for you because once you took it on, I felt like you were like, it was off to the races for you in
yeah,
doing that. So,
yeah.
I kinda talk about that because it leads into what you're doing right now, so I think it's really vital in your story.
Yeah. No, and thank you for saying that. And I love your perspective, like how you saw me go through all that. But man, initially, after the divorce, I think the shock of it all, so just a little more context, I was about 240 some pounds at the time of the divorce, and the whole shock of everything that happened. I lost like 20 pounds in just grief, I think. It
Mhm,
was just like, the sheer fact that I felt like my life was broken. It was, And so at the time, and one of the things that I think both of us we may have had our moments, but we never really blamed God. Like we might have asked God why, and maybe even got mad at God
yeah,
for why we dealt with it, but we never said it's your fault and I'm never going to see you again. That we never closed the door on God. We kind of got that theologically, even though we grew up, a little bit skewed here and there with legalistic perspectives, but we
yeah,
really did understand that the world's broken and God is not to blame. And so the initial shock of that, uh, lost a ton of weight, and then I didn't feel comfortable around uh, friends that were your couple's friends.
yeah,
I'm like, man, it's different now. It's different. I feel like like it's just me and me. It was really weird. And so I went to the gym, started going to Bally Total Fitness in Thornton, and a friend of mine that I had known from work, and her husband would go to my dad's church. Said, "Hey, you got to try cycling. You got to try this spin class. Like it's going to be the best workout you've ever had. You're going to sweat. Bring a towel, bring a water, And I'm like, all right, I'm in. Super nervous, super, never done this before. I did, we always exercised growing up. We always
Yeah,
had played.
you were pretty athletic when you were
Yeah.
younger.
Yeah, we played football, we played basketball, we played in the street, in your front
Yeah.
yard, all of that stuff. And so, yeah, I could ride a bike, an indoor bike or whatever. And I loved it, man. Like the instructor played really good music, music I wasn't allowed to listen to. No, it played really good music. And then the the class itself welcomed me in as their own, and then they're like, "Man, here's you're welcome here," And it was like community, music, and a workout, like all happened at the same time, and
Yeah.
it just blew my mind. I'm like, I love this. Like, I love this. And we already had the musicality, you and I and the guys growing up. So I'm like, man, this is like, I didn't realize you could have so much fun writing to Pitbull or writing to, one, whoever was popular at the time.
Yeah.
And it was a blast, man. It was a blast. And then, by God's grace, and keep in mind, and this, but just so the audience knows, we had already started our church when I went through this season. We were about
Yeah.
3 years, yeah,
Yeah.
3 years into pastoring when I went through
Yeah,
this divorce. Yeah.
I think you're like a 2 episode guy because you have to.
Yeah, there's a lot, but I'll fast forward it and maybe we come back to some
No,
elements of
yeah,
this.
because yes.
But yeah, so by God's grace, because of the way that the divorce happened, it not being I not being the one who sinned, if you will, I was allowed to continue to pastor after several months. And
Yeah.
so in this interim time, when they were helping me get some help and I would be at the gym, I also decided, man, I'm gonna go back to school. Like I need to do something with my life. I was starting to feel good, starting to find a new community, signed up for Bible college. I'm like, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And so uh over the next 5 years, something like that, I got my degree in biblical studies, and I ended up getting a master's in biblical theology and in strategic leadership. So I did like a double master's in that 5 year span after the divorce, and became a cycling instructor inside of that about 3 years, 2 years into that. Um, because I loved it so much. And there's a ton behind that, but I fell in love with it, lost weight, had an opportunity to teach a class because the instructor couldn't teach it anymore. And I'm like, I know music. Like I'm in front of people all the time because I have to bring a message. Um, I'm conditioned to do this already. I feel good. I have the right, I had all the right skill sets to do it. And so that launched me becoming an indoor cycling instructor, a spin instructor, as some people might know it better.
Yeah.
And just had a ton of success early on because I was so passionate about it, like the playlist and the music and the volume. And I knew where the drops were because we just knew music.
Yeah.
So if you do a sprint right when the beat hits, like people resonate with that, they're like, oh, let's go. Like it just pushes you. And so people, loved my classes, were waitlisted, and it was just a really cool thing, man. It was really cool. Lots of fun.
Yeah, and I think about just in your position of being a pastor, and I think like I said, we'll probably hit more of that on a second episode with you because this is I could talk to you for hours,
Yeah,
and
for
but
sure.
I think what I why I wanted to have you on this episode initially was because I mean I think you have a amazing story about just self growth and where you've taken your physical growth, and you've always had your spiritual, and you're speaking on your education, but your physical growth at a point was you knew what you needed to do, and like I said, you you put that fire was there and it just has stayed lit for you, and that's something I always appreciate about you. And I
Thanks,
think,
man.
yeah, man, and to where you're at now, where we were kind of discussing about your your YouTube channel, JA Cycles, and the growth of it, and it does take time, and it does, but you have stuck that out, and I think a lot of people have honestly benefited from what you're doing because they can see the passion in everything you're doing and the experience of performing in the past with
Mm.
God's New Creation
Yeah.
Candle. You know, that was a big I think that's a big factor of and it's like, hey, I
It
kind of
it
take
it all it all fit together, man.
I feel like I could take
Yeah.
some credit for your
Of
growth, you
course.
know?
Of course, man. Like you know, it's amazing what God does because you s- you stand in front of a class for the first time that you're teaching a Bible study, right? Like in front of your friends, and then later you stand in front preaching. Then later you stand in front of a class leading a workout, and then later you're performing music. You know, and it's like it all like God uses all of those things to refine our skills and then use it in a different season. You know,
Yeah.
um, it all came together, man. All our performances, you know, the public speaking, the preaching, whatever we want to call it, not being afraid to stand up in front of a group of people, you know, and it just kept going, man. And I thank God for it. I thank God for the channel. Speaking of that specifically, it's something that I I I think that God has always given me uh, different passions and desires to keep me from imploding, to keep me from doing maybe really
Yeah.
stupid things. I don't know. I don't know what the stupid things would be because
I
I'm so
I
far
know what you
removed
mean.
from that, but I have the capability of doing probably some pretty dumb things if I don't have some focus in life, you know, a family to feed and a mission to
Yeah.
accomplish and a church to be there for. And, you know, like it's one of those things where I thank God, you know, for all of it. But the channel specifically, man, I have a ton of fun with it. It's been a labor of love. It's been over 4 years of releasing at least one video a week. I only missed in the past 4 years. I've only missed like maybe 4 weeks. You know,
Yeah.
where had to skip a week because I was sick or on vacation or didn't get ahead of it enough. You know, but yeah, it's fun, man, and I still get to
Well
teach in person too. So it's good.
I think it and like I said, you really inspired, even from what you were doing, as a I consider you a top content creator, you know, in your field, you know, and I know
Thanks.
it may not you think, well, I don't have the subscribers some of these other ones do, but I think what you do, because I've watched yours and the things that you do and are far above what any other creators are. I mean, because and it is because of your background, of your performance background, your
Yes.
musicality background, everything. And man, I think anybody who's listening to this, it's if they're not if you're on a bike on a cycle and you're not watching JA cycles, there's something wrong with you because this guy,
Oh man.
I'm telling you, it's crazy, you know. I was listening to one of yours today, and it was talking about your even the challenges of implementing Christian content in
Mhm.
in your cycling and the
Yeah.
challenges you've had just because of the rights, you know, the copyright infringement and stuff like that. But um, you know, I've never seen it as, oh, well, you're using this type of music, whatever. I just think that you're utilizing something to make somebody better, you know, and truly make somebody better. And your intentions are that way. It's
Mhm.
not just for yourself. It's for like, man, I really want I think I could really help people through what
Yeah.
I'm doing,
Yeah.
you know. And dude, I'm telling you, it really conveys when you're doing it. And I'm sure a lot of people appreciate that about you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, man. I mean, I think you know, every once in a while I'll look at like what God has given me, and He's certainly given me a lot. Beautiful family, church, friends. That who else can say they've had friends since, you know, elementary school, since kindergarten. You know, there's
Yeah.
not a lot of people that could say they're still friends with them. Uh, and then God, I'll say God, man. I don't say man to God or whatever, but I say
Yeah.
God. Like I like why have you given me so much, And he'll just show me like everything I've given you, you use for other people.
Mhm.
Like you might have like a bunch of cameras and a nice setup and a studio and some really nice equipment, and a nice space to have it, but it's all for other people. It's not even for you, and I'm
Yeah,
just like, wow, like, all
it's
right, God,
true.
like, and you've been faithful to do that for other people, and it just like God reminds me of that every once in a while, like, because you don't ever want to take for granted the blessings that God has given, and he'll
Yeah,
he'll
and you talked about it's totally the way, like you said, your dad, and you've carried a lot of the things that your dad has given you. I guess as far as his way of doing things, you're like, you look at it, then you're like, man, why are you doing that, dad? But now you're like, man, this is why my dad's doing it, because it worked, and you've seen where his heart was, and you're like,
my
man,
my dad would give everything away.
yeah,
I
we
told you, and
talked about
I
that.
hated it. Yeah, like he would give away the like subwoofers and guitars, and I'm like, Dad, that's ours. That should be
Yeah,
for ours. And now you find yourself understanding, like, yeah, it's so much better to give, than receive. It's so much better to give of yourself, to give of the gifts that God has given you, whatever that, whatever the capacity has given you, like give it away. Like it's a
yeah.
beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thank you for inspiring this. I mean, because you were a big inspiration in this podcast. Because I think when I was looking, and I discussed with you guys about doing the Kings of Monaco podcast, it was kind of a feed off of like, well, I know you already started this. You already got the ball rolling with JA Cycles. I'm like, why don't we do something of a, kind of a discussion of our friendship?
Yeah.
And after that point, I was like, man, I there I've always thought in my mind there I feel like I've lived like 10 different lives, and there's always those on to the next moments in my life that I've had to make pivotal changes. And I honestly, not all of them have been good, and I've had to like kind of back my way out of some dark corners, and you know
Sure.
hit the other direction and let God just guide me instead of me trying to guide myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I you were totally an inspiration in getting this going, and you were I mean, a real big help in even getting some of this stuff going. So I appreciate you doing that for me, man. It's been a pleasure being your friend all these years, that's for
Bro,
sure.
bro, I love you, man. Like this is like, I think it's not too many people get what we have,
Yeah.
you know, and I think I'm committed to in in 2 days, as of the recording of this, you're gonna release it whenever you release it. But in 2 days, I turn 50,
I
and it's
know,
just
and well, I was
it's
gonna
wild to think about it, man.
you
It's
beat me
wild
to
to
the
think about it.
punch, because I was
Yeah,
gonna talk about you, because I know that, this will be aired next Monday. I was gonna
yeah,
discuss that because it's a pinnacle point, and, I enjoy seeing your 50th, birthday cycle.
yeah.
That was cool, and,
It was fun, man.
yeah, but, it's cool seeing that. But, I mean, 50 years, man, and we've known each other pretty much, I was 90% of that, we've
Yeah.
known each other.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been in
And
each other's lives at some level for sure. And my prayer right now, and I went to visit my mom yesterday because we're gonna be away for the weekend. So I wanted to see her before my birthday. And I said, just stood there sitting in the living room, and I said, Mom, thank you for everything you've given me. I'm committed to not getting older and grumpier. I said, I want to be more humble. I want to love people more. I want to help more people. And I want to be really aware of that, because I feel like the older I get, um, the more you think to yourself, man, why is that kid like that? Or why is this, and I want to be that. I want to be that older person that influences people, not older that gets grumpy and says, move away from me.
yeah.
And so I'm committed to like a soft heart, man, as much as I possibly can. So you got to hold me accountable. You see me getting a little old and grumpy, you better better
Cool,
tell me,
man.
call me out, bro. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
yeah. And
I'll
LeBeau, I know LeBeau was trying to call you out on the last episode. Not
yeah,
kidding,
yeah,
but no, man. I really, I really think you're heading in the right direction. You've been heading in the right direction most of your life, and it's been fun to watch. You've been a mentor for me in parts of my life, being a pastor to me, and it's just been a pleasure to be a part of it. And I know that going into 50, because I'm right behind you. I'm on your heels
yeah.
of hitting that 50 mark. But I feel the same way, man. I feel like that was a big part of me retiring from my corporate job and taking on some new roles and doing things. And this kind of being one of those things,
Yeah.
of kind of being obedient to God and saying, God, I'm kind of trusting you in this direction, and knowing that, um, through it all, like I know God takes care of us, as long as we're being good stewards to what he put in front of us. And
Absolutely.
that being, the skills we have, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I love doing it, and I love that you've inspired it. And um so yeah, man.
It's
Well,
good, man.
Joe, happy birthday, because I
Thanks,
know
brother.
by the time this comes out, it'll be past your birthday. So,
Thank you, man.
um,
Thank you.
shout
Feel all
out.
right.
Yeah, I know you look good, man. So
Thanks,
still
brother.
looking good
We
at
I
that
think we all
50.
look good, man. We all look
Yeah,
good. Yeah. We our genes, whatever was in the water in Commerce City is keeping us looking all right, I feel like.
yeah.
Yeah.
The conversation, I'm telling you, it's that radioactive stuff. It might have given us that Benjamin Buttons effect,
Yeah.
maybe.
I mean, we lost our hair because of it, but the rest of it been good,
Yeah, uh,
been
got
all
to take
right.
the good with the
So
bad.
yeah. But no, thank you too, man. Thank you. You've always been somebody who I've seen make very informed decisions throughout your life, whether that be join a worship team, move on to something different, move to another state. Like you've always had calculated decisions that were intentional, and you knew why you did that. You knew, and you were always responsible with it.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that is like there was a couple of seasons where you came and led worship for us, and you never missed, and you never, but when it was time for God to move you, you were super like, hey, here's what God's putting on my heart. I have about a month left, or I have about 2 weeks, or I'll stay until this. And it was never like, you never left anybody hanging, man, because you were
yeah,
committed. And so I really appreciate that about you, and how God has created you that way to honor people, and to keep your word. You're a
yeah.
man of your word, and it's been beautiful to see that, man. And I can't wait to see what God does with this too, because a lot of people, everybody could resonate with those pivotal moments, those on to the next moments, man. And that's
Yeah, and
that's
that's
what this is it. This is it here, man.
yeah, and it was a big part of having you on, because I think there's going to be plenty of people who are inspired by what you gave throughout this podcast. And it's like I said, man, I'm just doing this, and you do it just like you do your J cycles. I'm doing it because it's something that I have to share with everybody.
Yeah,
A lot out there, and um, hopefully somebody's touched by the stories and
yeah,
blessed with them.
oh
So,
yeah,
but man, there's so much for us to discuss. I
yeah.
mean, we do
Part
it all the
two.
time on. Yeah, there's a lot we do on the Kings of Monaco, but there's still a lot of stories for us to get to. But I appreciate you, man, for coming on
It's been
and
good.
joining me on to the next, man.
Yes, thank you, man. Appreciate you having me.
All right, have a good one, Joe.
Yep, you too, brother.
Like,